Hello and welcome back to my channel. My name is Crypt13 and in today's video we are going to be analyzing some of Kokomi's weapon options. We're definitely going to take a look at her signature weapon and decide whether or not it's actually worth it to pull for it. And by worth it, that's totally going to be up to you, but in this video I'm gonna define it as how much more damage we actually deal with it. The other weapons we're going to be looking at today are the Prototype Amber, the Thrilling Tales 3-star weapon, Dodoco Tales, and the Mappa Mare. We won't be looking at the sacrificial fragments in this video because I don't think we can get a second jellyfish from the passive effect, and vaporized damage most likely won't be her main focus. However, if it does turn out that it is, then I'll come back and revisit this weapon. And check out my Twitch channel, that's where we got the data for this video, and so if you're interested in the behind the scenes, go check that out. I also stream variety games over there. Alright, now let's actually get into the video. Firstly, we're going to be taking a look at a couple of weapons here for Kokomi. First off is the Prototype Amber, and then it's the Thrilling Tales 3-star weapon, an R5 Dodoco Tales, Mappa Mare, and we're not going to be taking a look at the sacrificial fragments in this video because I don't think we can get a second jellyfish with the ability, and the elemental mastery is not going to be too good on Kokomi. Well, I don't want to say not too good, but it's not likely going to be her main focus. But if it does turn out that Vaporize is going to be her main focus when she actually gets released, then I'll come back and revisit this weapon. There are also arguments for the Hakushin Ring and the Eye of Perception, but those builds are really niche, so we're not going to go into that. Same goes for the Favonius Codex, but you can't hit a crit with her at all, so you're not going to be proccing this passive ever. So let's first take a look at the Prototype Amber. So firstly, this is going to be hands down her best 4-star weapon because the substat here is HP %. It also gives you extra elemental burst energy whenever you use it. So you're basically refunding energy every time you use your elemental burst. It's also going to heal, so she's just going to become a better healer in that sense as well. So having this HP substat as well as this extra energy regeneration makes this the perfect fit for a Kokomi. Next up is the Thrilling Tales, and this one is very similar to the Prototype Amber because of the substat giving HP. Although the stats are a bit lower, it still does pretty well, and we'll go into the math later on in the video. The passive here is also really good when you switch into another character, one of your support characters like Xiangling or Xingqiu, and they pop their burst and snapshot that damage. It's gonna be pretty good. Or if you want to use another sub DPS character on your team, not just Kokomi, that deals a big amount of damage for the team, you can also use this passive to boost their damage, making your team damage even better. So when you're using this weapon, your rotation might look something like this. You start with Kokomi, you pop your E skill, you switch into your character that you want to get the boost for, so like a Xiangling or Xingqiu, like I just mentioned. Maybe a Xiangling so she can get some pretty nasty Vaporize Pyronados, and then you swap into the rest of your characters, get all of their elemental bursts and skills off, and then switch back into Kokomi, pop your burst, and go to town with Kokomi. All of this while your Pyronado is dealing increased attack damage because of this passive. And you'll see later that these low base stats and substat is not actually a big deal. Next up is the Dodoco Tales, and this weapon seems like it'd be pretty good because you get an attack % increase as well as a charge attack damage bonus, but attack % is not very good on Kokomi. Her base attack is not very high, so the percentage that you get from this is not as good. You'll see later that this 16% attack bonus doesn't really add to Kokomi's damage when she's in her elemental burst. However, the charge attack bonus does make this weapon the best for a charge attack focused Kokomi. However, using charge attacks with Kokomi might not be the best idea because it costs 50 stamina to use, and she has no way of reducing the amount of stamina it costs to use her charge attack. So even though the charge attack is better than the other weapons, it's only slightly better than the Prototype Amber, and I mean just very slightly. And then in terms of everything else, her jellyfish and her normal attacks and her burst skill damage, it's all lower than both the Prototype Amber and the Thrilling Tales weapon. Next up is the Mappa Mare, and this is going to be a pretty good weapon if Vaporize turns out to be a really good option for her, as well as the Sacrificial Fragments. But otherwise, as expected, this is not going to outperform the Prototype Amber and even the Thrilling Tales 3-star weapon. Now, that is all considering if you don't have the Infusion Scroll passive activated. So now if you have this passive activated and you have this 8% elemental damage bonus up to 2 stacks, so at R1 16%, this weapon actually does do better damage than the Dodoco Tails, but it only does better in terms of normal attack and the Jellyfish and the burst skill damage. Your charge attacks are still going to be weaker than the Dodoco Tails with Map of Mare when you have your damage bonus applied. And even still, this weapon does not outperform the Prototype Amber or the 3-star weapon Thrilling Tales of Dragon Slayers. So out of these 4 weapons, if we had to order them, it's going to be the Amber, the Thrilling Tales, the Map of Mare, and then the Dodoco Tails. And the Map of Mare and the Dodoco Tails, you know, we can kind of argue how you would order them, but they're really close to each other, and I'm just putting Map of Mare at the top because Vaporize can end up dealing more damage. And for the Dodoco Tails, the only upside for this weapon is the charge attacks, and charge attacks are really expensive for Kokomi, so that's why I'm rating this one lower. And then of course you have her signature weapon, the Moonglow. Obviously this one is not the Moonglow, but pretend that it is. And with that weapon, you really want to use your normal attacks more because the weapon actually boosts your normal attacks. And they really want you to focus on using your normal attacks over your charge attacks. The Moonglow is also not too great for other characters besides Barbara, because only Barbara can really utilize the healing bonus and the HP bonus that the weapon gives. Other Catalyst users don't really make good use of HP stats, so they're not really going to like using the weapon. Although it's pretty nice being a stat stick, and they can utilize the extra energy regen by just using their normal attacks after they use their burst. It's only half of the weapon's kit, so the other half is just being wasted. And so if you consider that the Moonglow doesn't really work too well on most other Catalyst users, you're gonna have to hope that the weapon actually does a lot better than your other free-to-play options. And again, we're going to look into that when we come to the math section. Otherwise, you might want to reconsider pulling for this weapon if you're looking for better damage. But of course, there's a whole bunch of people that play this game, so if you're pulling for looks, then who am I to stop you? So before we get into the math section, we need to go over the parameters that I'm using. This is going to be a level 80 Kokomi that's ascended to the final ascension phase. And we're going to be taking a look at talent level 8 scaling. The constants for these calculations is that we're always going to be using a 2-piece Heart of Depth with a 2-piece Maiden set, as well as HP % Sands, a Hydro Damage Goblet, and Healing Bonus Circlet. The subsets that we have are 3 rolls of attack %, 6 rolls of HP %, and 6 rolls of flat HP. So this is a fairly standard Kokomi, no whale vibes here. Okay, so let's go ahead and take a look at our first chart here. This kind of chart is a little bit hard to parse, but we can draw a couple of conclusions and patterns from this. Let's just start all the way on the left side and take a look at those set of bars, and we can see that the Skyward Atlas is the strongest weapon when we're dealing non-burst normal attacks. However, the only time your non-burst normal attacks are really ever going to be used is if you're using your Kokomi in the overworld and you just don't want to swap off of her. Her main role and main source of damage is going to be coming from her elemental burst mode. So really, the non-burst damage doesn't matter too much. But that will matter to those of you guys who don't really care about the endgame content and who really only just care about using your Kokomi in the overworld. The other weapon that does pretty well when it comes to non-burst attacks is the Dodoco Tails. That is denoted by the green and yellow bars, so you can see that in the middle. The next set of bars here is what we really care about. The normal attack combo while we're in our burst mode. The highest damaging weapon is obviously going to be her signature weapon, the Moonglow. And visually, it looks like it is quite the big gap here. The second best weapon is the Prototype Amber and the Thrilling Tales, and then the Skyward Atlas. So a 4-star weapon and a 3-star weapon is dealing better damage than the Skyward Atlas. And as expected, as I said earlier, the Dodoco Tails and Map of Mare don't do too well when it comes to our elemental burst damage. The pattern on the charge attack bar looks pretty similar, it just has lower scaling, so visually the gaps don't look as large. The big thing you'll notice here is that the Dodoco tails with the buffs, the green bar, is really high up there, and like I explained earlier, this is because of the charge attack bonus that this weapon gives us. And then when we come down to her jellyfish damage, those gaps are definitely a lot tighter, and the same goes for the activation skill damage. Now let's move on to the stacked version of this chart, and I like this a little bit better just because it's a little bit more clear visually. The other chart broke it down by individual parts of her kit, and then this one gives us a more overall picture. However, there are some important things that we have to note about this. Firstly, this one plots all of her damage sources, so this includes her non-burst damage, and depending on the type of content you want to tackle, this part of her kit may or may not matter to you. So if that part of her kit does matter to you, then you can kind of generally see the overall rankings for these weapons. The best weapon, as expected, is her signature weapon, and then the weapon that comes next is the Skyward Atlas, but it's very closely followed by the prototype Amber, and then the Dodoco tails with buffs, and then the Thrilling Tails, and then everything after that. So here's what the chart looks like when we remove her non-burst normal attacks, charge attacks, and E-skill. And you'll notice that things definitely change. The Skyward Atlas is now below the prototype Amber and the Thrilling Tails, but everything else is performing just as expected. So for those of you guys wondering if the Skyward Atlas is worth it on Kokomi, the answer is that it depends. But in a lot of situations, prototype Amber and Thrilling Tails does just as good as the Skyward Atlas, and they're going to cost you less resources. So if you have to level up a Skyward Atlas from level 1 all the way up to level 90, you might want to reconsider if you are trying to save on resources. But obviously, the glaring thing that's missing from this chart is the extra damage that the Skyward Atlas provides from its passive skill, but that damage is considered physical damage and is based off of Kokomi's attack stat. Kokomi's attack stat is not going to be very high, and her physical damage is going to be super low. So yes, we should be adding a little bit of extra damage to the Skyward Atlas in these graphs, but it's really not going to be that much damage, and the passive skills from the prototype Amber and the Thrilling Tails is going to be way better. The extra energy regen and the extra attack percent, in my opinion, is better than a little bit of extra physical damage. Now let's take a look at some of the percent differences, and everything here is in comparison to her signature weapon. Also, please do note that for the Moonglow here, I highlighted it in red. Our normal attacks when we are not in our burst is incorrectly calculated. I did not include the extra normal attack damage bonus for the Moonglow. But note that's only when we're not in our burst mode. When we are in our burst mode, it is calculated correctly. So first off, taking a look at our normal attacks while we're in our burst, there is quite a sizable gap between her signature weapon and all of the other weapons. For the prototype Amber, there's about a 15% damage difference, and with the Thrilling Tails, it's almost 19%. When it comes to every other weapon, we're looking at a 25+% damage difference, so that is a huge gap. The only notable one is Mappa Mare with its buffs active, that's only about 23%. And for the Skyward Atlas, since it's dealing about the same amount of damage as a Mappa Mare with buffs, that's also going to be at around the 23% range. So yeah, this tells us that using her signature weapon and normal attacks, you are definitely going to be getting the most damage. And it's definitely how you want to be using her signature weapon, since it also has a passive that is directly tied to using her normal attacks, in which you regenerate energy. So when we move on to her charged attacks, you can see that that gap definitely closes down a bit. With the prototype Amber, there's now only a 10% difference, and with the Thrilling Tails, we are now at 13.5%. The Dodoco tails you can see here, without the buffs, there's a 23% difference, but when we have our buffs, Dodoco tails provides a nice 32% charge attack bonus, and the damage difference there is only 6.7%. And notably, it's even better than the prototype Amber and the Thrilling Tails. Moving on to our jellyfish damage, the prototype Amber is only a 5% difference, and the Thrilling Tails is only a 9.2% difference. As we continue down the list, Dodoco tails without any buffs, there's a 13.6% damage difference. With buffs, it's an 11.5% damage difference. For the Mappa Mare, 18.5%. With buffs, 10.5%. And then lastly, our burst skill activation damage, the gap is even lower. Prototype Amber only has a 3.5% damage difference, the Thrilling Tales is only 6% damage difference, and then surprisingly, Dodoco Tales with buffs and Mappa Mare without its buffs all deal the same amount of damage, and the damage difference here is about 22.9% damage difference. Mappa Mare with its buffs is about 15% damage difference. So at the end of the day, the Prototype Amber and the Thrilling Tales are your non-5-star options, and you're going to decide based on which passive skill you want more. Do you want to be able to generate more energy for Kokomi herself? Or do you want that extra attack percent bonus given to the next character that you swap into? And I wanted to show you that swapping to the 4-piece Heart of Depth didn't really change which weapon did better. We did this on my stream, so if you're interested in that, then definitely go check out the stream. If I missed anything, let me know down in the comments. And don't forget to leave a like and comment down below to help me out with the algorithm. And if the video really helped you out, then consider subscribing to my channel. Did you know that less than 5% of the people that watch my content are actual subscribers? So help me out and hit that subscribe button. It's free. And anyway, until next time, I will see you guys later.